All aboard the choo-choo. The clock says it's time to talk about murder on the Orient Express. What's up, fans? I'm Andrew Fantasia, and this is Thumb Together. We're going to talk a little bit about murder today, because that's everybody's favorite topic. Murder on the Orient Express, to be more specific. It's a murder that happens on a train. This movie is based off of a very popular and quite old now Agatha Christie novel. You don't know who Agatha Christie is. She is today, as far as I'm concerned, she's the queen of murder mystery. Like when you hear the phrase a mystery book, Agatha Christie is like the cream of the crop. You don't top her. Even the Sherlock Holmes books don't top her, because I don't know why, but they just don't. It's sort of like an unwritten rule. But anyway, Agatha Christie books are the hotness when it comes to mystery, and Murder on the Orient Express is probably her most famous. This is not the first time it's been made into a movie, but this is the first time in a very long time that it's been made into a movie. So this is about as modern as this story gets. So was it good? Was it bad? Did they do it justice? Well, let's hop right in and take a look at this movie. I will be talking about spoilers. I'm actually gonna have to give away the answer to this mystery, but I will warn you ahead of time once we get to the spoilers. So diving right into the bare essentials, we have Inspector Hercule Poirot, who's played by Kenneth Branagh, and he directed this too, if I remember right. He's awesome. Kenneth Branagh is always awesome. But let's get the elephant out of the room right now, because it's going to be there. His mustache. We've all seen it. We all saw the trailer or the pictures or what have you. We all know. We've made the jokes. We've laughed. We've guffawed. Let's get out of the way now. Kenneth Branagh has a silly mustache in this movie. Okay? Okay, moving on. Now that we've gotten the facial hair out of the way, let's take a look at the story, which is, it starts off in Jerusalem. Kenneth Branagh, I keep calling him by his character name, Poirot. Poirot's in Jerusalem, and he's solving mysteries, and he's got eggs, and he likes his eggs to be evenly matched. He gets 2 eggs, and if one is not the same height as the other, he's like, no. You send them back, please. But he's not like a dick about it. He's not like a Starbucks customer who's like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to a human. I can't believe you got my eggs wrong. He's not like that. He's just like, no, I would like them perfect, please. Thank you very much. So you don't hate him, which is good, because you have to sit through 2 hours of hating your main character, you're in trouble. Poirot is taken, he's moved from Jerusalem, and he has to go to England, because there's an old case in England that's coming up again, and they need him there. So Poirot hops onto the quickest mode of transportation when you're going from the Middle East to Western Europe, and that is the Orient Express, the train that circumvents the entire continent of Europe. And he hops on board the train in Istanbul. And by the way, the scene in Istanbul is beautiful. Like, they made Turkey look so friggin' sexy in this movie. You see just like it's already a beautiful city, but then just the way they made it look, and you got the colors and everything, and you see the Hagia Sophia, and it's all and there's like a bakery with bread, and the bread is like the size of a whole pie, and it's like steaming because it's so fresh. And I'm sitting there in the theater, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, all I want to do is eat bread right now. And this is where you get to know everybody, because everybody is boarding the Orient Express in Istanbul. So all the characters, all the suspects and whatnot, start climbing on board the train. You got Josh Gad, who is thankfully not playing Olaf. Thankfully. You got my girl Daisy Ridley, Ray. She is on board. She is a governess, which back then did not mean she was governor of something. She was literally, she took care of people's kids. That's what a governess was. I know, it's a weird title. I still don't see where that came from. The etymology, that is weird. Leslie Odom Jr., Aaron Burr, sir. All my Hamilton fans out there. Leslie Odom Jr. is in this. He's a doctor. And he's got like a little doctor bag and everything. And I'm like, yay! Penelope Cruz, she is a It's not clear if she's a nun or if she's just super religious, but she is like, she's constantly like holding a cross, and she's like, the Lord will bless us. We have to trust in our Savior, Jesus Christ. That if you close your eyes, it's like she's right here in the room. And then you've got Johnny Depp, who is this sort of fast-talking 1930s gangster. You know, he probably works for Al Capone or something like that, and he's into a lot of shady business deals. And Josh Gad is his accountant who works for him. So he's like this nerdy kind of accountant guy. Derek Jacobi is in this. I didn't even know that guy was still alive. He's a butler. And, you know the old saying, the butler did it? Maybe. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I'm not getting into spoilers yet. Dame Judi Dench. Dame Judi Dench is here. She is a countess? Or no, she's a princess. She's a Russian princess. And I wasn't expecting her to be Russian, which is cool because Judi Dench is so like ostensibly British to everybody. So when she showed up and she was like, I would not like to be on this train, I was like, whoa, I've never heard Judi Dench talk like that before. Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer plays an American woman who seems like she's had her share of husbands who have all mysteriously died. So that, you know, they really take their time to build this world up. To show you who all these people are and how, you know, how dangerous they could potentially be. Initially, I was worried because the film isn't very long. It's maybe 2 hours, like if that. And I was worried at first that there were too many characters and that there wouldn't be enough time to flesh them all out. Because when you see that trailer, you see that, you know, that pan through the train car and there's like 24 characters who are suspects. You're just like, God, how am I going to get to know all these people in 115 minutes? Like, that doesn't sound doable. And I was worried that they were going to make the movie too short and too rushed. But it didn't feel like that. When I got to the end, I was like, okay, I know these people now. I get it. Another person who's in it, God, I can't remember her name, but she's the girl from Sing Street. And if you haven't seen Sing Street, holy crap, go see Sing Street. So all the characters are on the train, all the suspects are there. We have this great shot where it's a long continuous shot of everybody getting on the train, and it's filmed like the camera never goes inside the train; it's always out in the station. So you see people moving through the windows, and it's really neat. And we sort of get a sense of the spatialness of everything, of the geography of where all the train cars are. It's like, okay, so you board here. The kitchen is here, and then here's a passenger car, etc. It sets it up nicely so that when the mystery happens, you'll know, oh, okay, so this is where everybody is at this point in time. And then, of course, a murder happens. As the train is far up from civilization now, there's actually an avalanche because the train is going through the Alps, and there's an avalanche that blocks the train, and they're sort of stuck there, and they're waiting for... they're waiting for people to come from the next station stop to come and dig them out. And they are coming to dig them out. It's not like they're stranded and it's like, oh God, we got to start eating each other to survive. No, they're going to be saved. Like, you can see the people on their way to help them. But in the meantime, they're stuck on a immobile train with a murderer. And I don't think it's a spoiler if I tell you who gets murdered, because I think they gave that away in the trailers. If you really don't want to know, then maybe mute this. But the person who gets murdered is Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp they find him stabbed multiple times in his bunk. And he is, like I said, a very cruel, smooth-talking gangster. So he has a lot of enemies. There's a lot of people who want him dead. In fact, I think that's a line from the trailer where Poirot asks Josh Gad's character, did he have any enemies, anybody who would have wanted to see him dead? And Josh Gad says, take a number. So you really, you know, finding a culprit is already, you know, looking for a needle in a haystack in this case. And the rest of the movie is just the investigation. And here's where I think Kenneth Branagh deserves some praise, because it would have been very easy to make this movie really boring. It would have been so easy. It's essentially just talking to people and asking people questions. That's all it is. It's, you know, I found a body. Okay, so where were you when this happened? Where were you when this happened? Why would you, what's your connection to the victim? And that could have just been a slog. It could have gone on and on and on. We could have just had 2 hours of nothing but questions and answers, and it would have become a blur. Thankfully, Kenneth Branagh managed to avoid that. And I'm not even 100% sure I can pinpoint how he did it. It's very, like, nothing too extravagant happens. It is very straightforward. It is questions and answers. But I guess he takes great care to use some dynamic areas, back, like camera movements. Like, he never interviews two people. Like, there's never an interview that happens in the same location twice, is what I'm trying to say. Like, he'll interview one person in their cabin, another person he'll interview like in a car, like in the main hall of a car, and they're walking back and forth. Another interview will happen in the kitchen, another one will happen in the dining room, another will happen outside the train. He actually takes Daisy Ridley outside the train and like puts a table out in the snow, and they sit down in the snow and have tea. So it's he does a good job of keeping it from being stagnant. I think Branagh deserves to be commended for giving us dynamic interrogations, because that's not a thing you think about. You think about a murder mystery, the two things that pop to your mind is, the murder and the final reveal. But you never think about in between, all the clues being put together, all the pieces. That was one of the reasons why I gotta say, I hated that movie, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. You all remember that? That Gary Oldman movie? It was based off a Le Carre novel. It came out a few years ago. God, I could not stand that movie. And the reason why, it's a mystery. It's about communists, though, not like a murder mystery, but it is a mystery. There is like a suspect, and they have to figure out who it is from a list of like 5 or 6 people. But the reason that it just fell flat for me was because the whole movie was literally Gary Oldman reading paperwork. That was it. He's got like 4 dudes where he's like, I know it's one of you, and we the audience don't even get a chance to try to put clues together and figure it out along with him. We just watch him read paperwork for 2 hours, and then he's like, it was this guy. Movie over. Murder on the Orient Express doesn't have people reading paperwork, as far as I can remember, at least not extensive uses of it. Poirot is always active. He's always walking around. He's thinking. He's chewing, mulling stuff over. And they took the time. They didn't even have to do this, but they took the time to give Hercule Poirot an arc. The thing that I mentioned at the beginning with the eggs, that kind of sort of comes into play. His personality is a big factor. He's not just a perfect man who walks in and solves the crime and then scoots off again. He learns a thing or two about himself and about the world at the end of this movie, which is beautiful. I wasn't expecting that, and I'm very good job. Like, I'm happy that they did that. Otherwise, it would have just been lame. The suspects all had decent characteristics. Like we got so little of them because there are so many of them and we only have so much time, but we got enough of pretty much everybody. The girl from Sing Street kind of took a long time to get to her. Like, I forgot she was on the train because it was so long from when we see her in Istanbul to when we finally see her on the train that I was like, oh yeah, she's here. There's the whole concept of the red herring. Everybody in this case is a red herring, but there are a few where you're like, I think you're not a red herring. I think you're real. And it really plays with your mind, because it's not just a matter of the traditional, here's a red herring, but I'm misdirecting, and here's the real bad guy. They really sort of get more into it than that. And it's hard to say more without spoilers. I will say that who I thought did it, I was wrong. But that, in a nutshell, is Murder on the Orient Express. I think they did a great job. They even set up a possible sequel. Agatha Christie has another book with Poirot. It's either called Murder on the Nile or I think it's Murder on the Nile. I was going to say Jewel of the Nile, but that's the sequel to Romancing the Stone, I think. They teased that. There was like a moment where somebody goes up to Poirot and they're like, hey, mister, we got a dead body on the banks of the Nile. They need you in Egypt right now. And he's like, oh, for the love of God. Okay, let's go. So that, I would be down for that. I'd be down to see Branagh come back as Poirot, because I dig what he did with it. Mustache notwithstanding. Just hopefully next time the trailer has a more appropriate piece of music. I love you, Imagine Dragons, but Believer and this movie, what? Where did that come from? So, Murder on the Orient Express, go see it. If you like a good mystery, you shan't be disappointed. But now I'm going to get into some spoilers. So if you don't want to know how this ends, by all means, stop watching this video now and go see the movie and then come back. But if you don't care and if you're not planning on seeing this, then stick around. We're going to talk about some spoilery things. So it is called Murder on the Orient Express. Johnny Depp does get stabbed a bunch of times. So who done it? Was it a satisfying payoff? A lot of times in mysteries, like I said earlier, you'll get a big misdirect, you'll get a lot of red herrings, and then when you finally find out who it was, you're just like, oh, I feel like you know, XYZ would have made a better suspect because of this and that, and you just tried to pull the wool over my eyes instead of trying to tell a good story. But in this case, I think they told a great story, to the point where when you find out who it was, when you find out who murdered Johnny Depp, it's a very beautiful, emotional reveal. I'll dig into it because it's hard to review this movie without saying what happens at the end. But it is one of my favorite parts of the movie. As the questioning is happening, as Poirot is talking to all these suspects, he quickly surmises that Johnny Depp's character is a sort of famous, like well-known criminal from back in the States who who kidnapped, molested, and murdered a little girl years back. So Johnny Depp is not a nice person. So as he's questioning these suspects one by one, we start to see that every person on this train has an odd connection to that little girl and or her family, to the point where 3/4 into the movie I'm just like, seriously, you know the family too? Like, how, this is the biggest friggin' coincidence in the world, to the point where it was almost kind of silly. I was like, oh my god, okay, how are you connected to this girl's family? Okay, yeah, you knew her, you taught her math at some point. Yeah, there's like a hump in the movie where you're like, oh my god, this is too coincidental, this is silly, it's ridiculous, stop it. But then the reveal comes, and it's sort of like a bucket of ice water being thrown over your head, and you're just like, whoa, that is neat. Like I said, this little girl, Johnny Depp kidnapped her. It's implied that he molested her, and then she was found dead, murdered. She's a little girl, like a 4-year-old. So that's pretty dark on the get-go. One by one, all these people on the train start confessing to Poirot that yes, they knew that family, the Armstrong family, their name was. They knew the Armstrongs, whether they knew the father, whether they knew the mother, whether they knew the girl. The girl had a sister, so it's like whether they knew her. All these little connections that kept tying back. Everything was the Armstrongs, everything tied back to this family. And when it gets to the point where Poirot has everybody seated at a long table, almost like Last Supper, like everybody's seated one by one in this very neat row, and he is describing like, okay, you could have done it because of this, you could have done it because of this. He starts to realize just how close these people were to this family. And then he points at Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and he says, the only person that I can't find a connection with is you. Which means you're either the only person on this train who doesn't have a reason to want Johnny Depp dead, or you've been lying to me. And it turns out it's the second option. She's been lying to him, and she takes off a wig. And she's not, in fact, a youngish blonde woman. She's actually a much older, dark-haired, quasi-gray-haired woman. And she says, that little girl was my granddaughter. And all of these people on this train, we were all, close to the Armstrong family. And it was all a joint venture by these people who, for years and years, their lives have been ruined because this little girl's murder. Whether they were family members of the girl, because you find out that the lady from Sing Street is in fact the girl's sister, now grown up. So there's connections within the family. There's people who were friends of the family, people who were servants of the family, who all had their lives ruined because this little girl was murdered by Johnny Depp. So all of them collectively purchased tickets on the Orient Express. They collectively bought out a train car. They sold it out. And then on that one night, they all snuck into Johnny Depp's cabin. And one by one, got their revenge. They took turns stabbing him in the heart. And the last person to have her turn was the one who was closest to the little girl, was Michelle Pfeiffer, her grandmother. And when you see this murder take place, when you see like the flashback, the reveal of it all, how it happened, and how all these people are sobbing, they're in tears, their lives have become like just a maelstrom of sorrow and anger since this tragedy happened to them, and it's all coming to a head, and they have the person responsible in front of them, and they're all just one by one lining up, and it's like, here, I stabbed somebody, I got him. They pull the knife out and they hand it to the next person, and they stand around his bed and they stare at him. That was so friggin' dark and cool and emotional and powerful. It is much more powerful than just a random person who's like, oh, I wanted his money, so I did it. And it would have been so easy to go down that route. But Agatha Christie took a much more interesting road. And this is not a new addition. I want to make that clear. This is not something that Kenneth Branagh added to this feature. This is how the story has always ended since it was written, I think, back in the 30s. So I'm very glad that even though I knew of this story, I'm very glad that I didn't know how it ended. In fact, I'm super glad that all these years it has never been spoiled for me, because this moment in this movie was absolutely phenomenal. And if I had known ahead of time, I probably would not have appreciated it as much. But it's worth the price of admission at least once. You owe it to yourself to watch it at least once just to see that final scene, because it really brings to mind some things about the human condition. And, you know, if this had been your family and you had the opportunity to do this to Johnny Depp, because he got away scot-free and blamed someone else for it and ruined someone else's life. Like, he just ruins lives in his wake. He leaves a path of destruction wherever he goes. So if you had the opportunity to have Johnny Depp in front of you, not Johnny Depp, to have this person in front of you who's responsible for all this murder and to take your vengeance out on them, would you do it or not? And that's what's so great about Inspector Poirot and his arc that I mentioned earlier, because at the beginning of the movie, Poirot makes a comment. He says that there are two kinds of people in this world. There are good people and there are bad people. I'm paraphrasing. He says that a little more intricately than that. But essentially, he sees the world as very black and white. He's like, there are people who commit crimes and people who obey the law. And my job is to find the ones who commit crimes. So by the end of this movie, he realizes that all of these people are guilty. But they're guilty of just being destroyed by this person who is even more guilty than them all put together. And at the end of the movie, he they say to him, like, well, we confess. Turn us in if you want. We don't care. We wouldn't, if we had the chance to go back, we'd do the same thing. And he basically lets them walk away. But it shatters his world a little bit, because Poirot grows up. Poirot realizes the world's not black and white. There are monsters in the world, sure, but then there are people who stoop down to that level because they've been hurt so badly by these monsters. And at the end of it all, he's thinking back to these eggs and how he wants them to be perfectly lined up. And it's just, what? It's not that kind of world, baby. The eggs are going to be different sizes, and we got a deal. But all in all, everybody did a great job. Watch this movie at least once, and you won't regret it. Trust me. Thank you for watching Thumb Together, and we'll see you next time. Until then, please don't murder people. It's not nice.